a ghost or madman. Although people called him such names, he remained silent and did not speak to anyone. And be satisfied with the Supreme Personality of Godhead on whom he meditates. In other words, one who has surpassed the rules and regulations of Varnashram Dharma is called Avadhuta. Such a person has already surpassed the clutches of Maya, and he lives completely separate and independent. So here Lord Rishabhdev is giving us all a perfect example of someone who is perfectly advanced, absorbed in his spiritual life, and totally detached from his material environment and his material body. Avadhuta means one who is completely beyond the bodily concept of life, and he's not following the, as described here, the conventions of Varnashram Dharma. Doesn't seem to be a sadhaka, but he's fully absorbed in his own personal relationship with the Lord. And we're going to read through a few verses, and his example is there, a very extreme example of one who's so much advanced. He's consciously situated in a different situation. He's not affected by his environment, by his bodily situation. It's described as a spiritual strength and a spiritual influence that allows someone like this not to be affected, to be actually aloof. So, in a little warning, to any of us who are, sometimes we may like to take up a little role of Avadhuta or be really aloof. But we're far, far away from that position, and we should appreciate how much advancement we have to go and appreciate the process of sadhana bhakti that's being given. Prabhupada said, such a person has already surpassed the clutches of Maya and lives completely separate and independent. So as long as we haven't come to this stage, we're completely dependent. Either we're under the influence of Maya, the three modes of material nature, or we take the opportunity and the privilege of having perfect guidance and a very straightforward path of sadhana bhakti to take shelter of. As we were hearing, the Jivatma is tatastha shakti, he's marginal, so he's either under the influence of the superior energy of the Lord, the internal energy, engaged in his eternal relationship with Krishna and protected from any material energy. Or he's under the influence of material energy, being pushed around by the modes of nature, or the waves as described, Narottam Das Thakur describes. Niche Maya Avashe Yachobeshe Kacha Havalubai. So we're being tossed around like in an ocean by the waves of material energy. But if one takes up his transcendental position, Chief Krishna Das, E Vishwas, Korale Toa Ardukanai, then he can be happily situated, absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And even though he's still in the ocean, he can be unaffected by the tossing of the waves. Just like a person on a boat, they say one who works, that's his occupation, they say he gets his sea legs. That means he's always being bounced here and there, but it's just the mode of life. He's accustomed to it, and he just adjusts and accepts that that's the way, that's his environment. So Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita, Daivi Yesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Taratya, that the material energy, consisting of the three modes of material nature, very difficult, Duratya, impossible to overcome. He who surrenders unto me can easily cross beyond it. So, after as Prabhupada said, my students come and they practice sadhana bhakti. They practice bhakti for a long time. Then, after a long time, they actually start practicing bhakti. So it takes some time. We'll be very lucky if we come to that platform in this lifetime. So the example of someone who is completely transcendently situated is very wonderful. And the activities of a transcendently situated person are equally as important for us as the words. It seems, although the words are intended to bring us to that platform, but to bring us, to convince our intelligence and bring us to the platform of a very a very good follower, a very good practitioner. And then by practice, we'll come to that stage of realization by Krishna's grace. As he says, Mam cha yoga vicharya bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati chaitanya brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So, by practicing uninterrupted bhakti, sadhana bhakti, then we transcend the modes of material nature, come to the spiritual platform. So, I'd like to read a couple more verses. These are long descriptive verses of the activities of Lord Rishabdev. After he left home, he left his Bharat to take over the kingdom. And he's just taking to the fully renounced, detached life. So the next verse. Rishabdev began to tour through cities, villages, mines, countrysides, valleys, gardens, military camps, cow pens, the homes of cowherd men, transient hotels, hills, forests, and hermitages. Wherever he traveled, all bad elements surrounded him, just as flies surround the body of an elephant coming from a forest. He was always being threatened, beaten, urinated upon, and spat upon. Sometimes people threw stones, stool, and dust at him, and sometimes people passed foul air before him. Thus people called him many bad names and gave him a great deal of trouble. But he did not care about this, for he understood that the body is simply meant for such an end. He was situated on the spiritual platform, and being in his spiritual glory, he did not care for all these material insults. In other words, he completely understood that matter and spirit are separate, and he had no bodily conception. Thus, without being angry at anyone, he walked through the whole world alone. Srila Prabhupada gives a purport here. Narottam Das Thakur says, Deha smriti nahi yar, samsara bandhana kahantar. When a person fully realizes that the material body and world are temporary, he is not concerned with pain and pleasures of the body. So, great realization that this body and material world, our environment around us, all temporary. But I'm an eternal spirit soul, so I'm just here temporarily in this situation. And there'll be some seemingly enjoyment and some distress. I just have to. But it's not my business to get absorbed in either the happiness or distress, but to get absorbed in the eternal situation. Then we're not hankering and lamenting. We just cut off that material, that process that is connected with a temporary body and the material world. Looking for reality, or looking for happiness in matter, and thinking that matter, beginning with this body, is reality. And then we have the information that descending, we have transcendental subject matter to fix our mind on. And sadhana bhakti and temple life is opportunity to absorb the senses, the mind and the senses, in spiritual activity. So it's a wonderful opportunity to practice detachment. As Rishabdev was said he was fully realized that matter and spirit are separate, and I'm not matter, I'm not part of this. So he was, because of his transcendental position, he was absorbed, spiritually absorbed. Shakti Avesh, he was empowered. He was showing an example, he was teaching, and he was showing an example of someone who's completely detached from material life and absorbed. It's not just artificial renunciation. But nothing could bother him. So he was able to travel like this and accept all this abuse by envious persons and not be bothered. So Prabhupada continues in this purport, as Sri Krishna advises in Bhagavad Gita 2:14, Matra sparshastra kaunteya chitoshna sukadukada agamapaino nityas tanustitiksha bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O son of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Just like we're all living in this wonderful environment in Chicago, and we're getting very intense winter seasons, and then very cold and bitter, and then summer's coming and very hot, and so we see them, and then in between, sometimes nice, and a lot of times we're tolerating the conditions. So we see that we just learn to tolerate it. We know it's going to change. The other season will come. So similarly, the temporary appearance and disappearance of the pleasures and pains of the body are coming and going. But we are the constant, conscious, living entity within the body. Prabhupada continues, as far as Rishabdev is concerned, it has already been explained. Idam shariram mama durvibhavyam. He did not at all possess a material body, and therefore he was tolerant of all the trouble offered to him by the bad elements in society. Consequently, he could tolerate people's throwing stool and dust upon him and beating him. His body was transcendental and consequently did not at all suffer pain. He was always situated in his spiritual bliss. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 1861, Ishvara sarvabhutanam hrideshe arjuna tishtati brahmayan sarvabhutani jantrabhutani mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Since the Lord is situated in everyone's heart, he is in the heart of hogs and dogs also. If hogs and dogs in their material bodies live in filthy places, one should not think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his Paramatma feature, also lives in a filthy place. Although Rishabdev was maltreated by the bad elements of the world, he was not at all affected. Therefore it is said here, Sva Mahima Avastanena. He was situated in his own glory. He was never saddened due to being insulted in the many ways described above. So the glory of the soul is to be fully realized, fully connected with Krishna. Experiencing the happiness of being in contact with the Lord, being the loving relationship. So we see even in this world, people are very steady and tolerant and enlivened if there is some kind of loving relationship, dynamic relationship. So this is another nice example or proof that we're a transcendental personality, that the soul is a personality, and our real need is personal relationship, loving relationship. Not just a combination of material elements. We even see that in other species of life, the animal kingdom. Plants respond to loving attention. So, but a fully Krishna conscious person is very, very different in that he's so strongly detached. I was thinking how Srila Prabhupada showed us that example, especially, throughout his whole life. You see the picture? Just upstairs is one picture of Prabhupada. He's early first year in New York, coming to this country, just walking walking on the street alone. He described how he didn't know whether to turn left or right. And he said, seemingly I was alone, but I never felt alone. I always felt the presence of my Guru Maharaj and Krishna. So Prabhupada had that connection, that relationship of devotional relationship and a mission to carry out. So we know he was always absorbed in praying and communicating with Guru and Krishna. And so he just tolerated all the troubles. Shastra explains that there are two kinds of spiritually perfected, elevated persons. Bhajananandi and Gosyanandi. So Rishabdev was internally absorbed. He is called Bhajananandi in his own relationship, gloriously absorbed, totally detached, and just tolerating everything. So this is Bhajananandi. Even in the world, he wasn't aloof in a bhajan kutir, but this is how strong he was. He was just wandering everywhere like a dumb, deaf person. But then there's the Gosyanandi, another amazingly, he's also traveling all over the world, Srila Prabhupada's example, Parivartakacharya, and he's teaching, he's distributing Krishna consciousness. And yet one can see that he's also internally absorbed. So that was Prabhupada's example, that he came to this country with nothing, with his mission, a few books, and he learned, he observed the Western people, big city of New York, learned so much about how they're thinking and acting and how degraded they were. And he applied, he taught the process of Krishna Bhakti and Lord Chaitanya's teachings and established the movement. And I was just appreciating how he's such an elevated person. He comes, it's described, the Uttama Bhakta comes down to the Madhyama platform, and he's distinguishing between all these different types of persons. He's managing the material energy. How much Srila Prabhupada did to establish this movement and continually traveling till his body was quite dysfunctional. He was practically being carried. And then in the last days, absorbed in explaining Srimad Bhagavatam. The doctor said that any man in that condition, he hadn't taken any solid food in 6 months, so he was just kind of skin and bones. So the skin was pressing on the nerves, on the bones. The doctor said any man would be in such tremendous pain, he could not even, he would be screaming or not able to tolerate it. But Prabhupada was going on, totally absorbed internally, sometimes interacting with his disciples, always concerned, still managing, trying to manage, guide devotees. And then fully deep, same realizations, no interruption, commenting on the Srimad Bhagavatam till his last day, practically. So we have a living example of somebody who was on that platform. And as the term here, he was situated in his own glory. So this is a worshipful position of a devotee who is as good as God. He can guide us, we can fully trust and follow him. That example. I think we could read one more verse here. Lord Rishabhadev's hands, feet, and chest were very long. His shoulders, face, and limbs were all very delicate and symmetrically proportioned. His mouth was beautifully decorated with his natural smile, and he appeared all the more lovely with his reddish eyes spread wide like the petals of a newly grown lotus flower, covered with dew in the early morning. The irises of his eyes were so pleasing that they removed all the troubles of everyone who saw him. His forehead, ears, neck, nose, and all his other features were very beautiful. His gentle smile always made his face beautiful, so much so that he even attracted the hearts of married women. It was as though they had been pierced by the arrows of Cupid. About his head was an abundance of curly, matted brown hair. His hair was disheveled because his body was dirty and not taken care of. He appeared as if he were haunted by a ghost. Purport. Although Lord Rishabhadev's body was very much neglected, his transcendental features were so attractive that even married women were attracted to him. His beauty and dirtiness combined to make his beautiful body appear as though it were haunted by a ghost. So interesting combination here. Spiritual beauty coming through, and his manifested body was wonderful. But because of his neglect of the body, he's looking like someone haunted by a ghost. And beautiful features coming through because he was empowered by the Lord. Very, very attractive. So, any discussion or comments? Richard first.
Hare Krishna. I wanted to know about another kid mentioned in class, Samadhi or the Highway. Samadhi or the Highway, there's a class that Don King and I took. Do you remember it? It was like a year ago or so. And in it, you mentioned about different durations of time being absorbed in Krishna, undeviating, Samadhi being the goal of life. And I was thinking about this in terms of being able to do, and it seems like it's one and the same. That we might get, at an elevated level, we might get some level of Samadhi, but then we come back around and reach our platform. So, do you think it's one and the same to be in constant remembrance and being able to do what you were saying? I'm asking.
Well, I pointed out, I understand your question probably. Is it the same thing to be in Samadhi and be Avadhuta? Well, there are two things. The Samadhi means that one is it's not a mechanical thing that we are fixing our mind on Krishna. Krishna is revealing himself to one in the real stage of Samadhi. He's fully absorbed in his spiritual relationship. It's not a matter of okay, now I'm going to engage in my japa, my meditation, whatever. So real samadhi is that one is internally absorbed by the Lord's own revelation to him, by his own fixed condition in his, he's fully liberated. He's in his own swarup, his own condition of spiritual life. So, and as we were pointing out, there are two things. One could be avadhuta, not following any rules and regulations and be fully absorbed, or avadhuta, or I don't know if I'm equating this properly, but bhajananandi, just absorbed in its own bhajan. Or traveling and preaching, like Srila Prabhupada did, like our Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas did, the 6 Goswamis did, eternal associates of the Lord. Rupa Goswami is Rupa Manjari. And at times he would, different of the Goswamis and others, showed that they were experiencing their internal relationships with Krishna. They would enter into, deep, deep samadhi. But their service was externally preaching Krishna consciousness, writing the Bhakti Shastras and distributing, and teaching kirtan, wonderful kirtan, and encouraging so many devotees. They were teaching and enlivening a bigger body of Vaishnavas who, as a team, as a transcendental army, they were spreading Krishna consciousness all over the Indian continent for the service of Lord Chaitanya. So, avadhuta is one manifestation.
Do you mind asking something to deal with that? Relationship to our a question on that in relationship to our ISKCON. It seems that we were encouraged to be the Ghost community.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a place for someone that is absorbed reading the scriptures, but is it not, because it's coming from under Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet ultimately, it's not really something that he encouraged, does it seem?
Like we're saying that, anyway, that avadhuta means, it's not something that avadhuta means that one is very highly advanced. Otherwise it's artificial, it's pretender. It just causes disruption to the society. There's a verse, describes, unless one is following the injunctions of Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatra Vikihina Aikantiki Hare Bhaktir Utpata Yaiva Kalpate. Unless one is following the directions of Shruti Smriti Puranas, then his activities are just a disturbance to society. So avadhuta is unusual. It's not the standard. And Lord Chaitanya himself made the request that he said, I order everyone to accept this Krishna consciousness movement and spread it everywhere. So if we really understand the mission of Lord Chaitanya and the teachings of our predecessor acharyas, then if we really want to please the Lord, then we'll take up the mode of distributing Krishna consciousness through Harinam Sankirtan, through distributing literatures, whatever preaching activities we can do. Okay. Hare Krishna.
I had no idea Prabhupada had no solid food the last 6 months of his life. I knew living on very little. And I've seen that video footage, but I didn't know it was for 6 months, so that's really quite remarkable.
Yeah. Well, we heard sometimes a strawberry. If you call that solid food.
My question is, so like we were hearing about Rishabh's austerities, you know, the kind of, I don't want to use, I guess austerity is not the right word, the treatment he was dealt with by people.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was fully self-realized, it didn't even disturb him. And I was taking that in a personal way that, okay, so we also get, you know, things coming at us, but we don't get people things through at us. But, you know, for us, even a small criticism is...
You say the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's school, you know. So, but we have to somehow remain satisfied, and we're not very advanced spiritually. So I was wondering if you could shed some light on how does a sadhaka who doesn't have such profound taste for Krishna consciousness remain steady and satisfied amidst the little disturbances. We've heard we should learn to tolerate. I'm wondering if there's anything else, if that's really just tolerate.
Rupa Goswami teaches, right, the necessary enthusiasm, patience, tolerance. But this is this is not artificial, right? We have to have something. So, my first response would be loving relationships amongst devotees, serving Vaishnavas, and if we're applying ourselves nicely to the sadhana process, then if we actually chant attentively 16 rounds of the Maha Mantra, then that should put us on a different platform. I remember when I began, Krishna consciousness started officially, I was quite a reclusive person, and I was actually afraid of going out on the street for distributing books or Harinam. And then I started, and it was a challenge, but every morning I was thinking, oh no, I have to go out. But I seriously I remember I was very seriously taking shelter of chanting 16 rounds, Maha Mantra. And after that, I just kind of lost all my, what's the word? Inhibitions, my defenses, and my worries about that. Your question again was, how do we deal with it? Not to be disturbed. That little external things are even with our own mind. I think that's it's a valid point that if we have, and I see it here because there's some very nice, loving and friendly relationships amongst devotees. People are maintaining their enthusiasm and they're tolerating the ups and downs. And Upadeshamrita, is giving that as loving exchanges amongst devotees, giving prasadam, accepting prasadam, giving and accepting gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, and also hearing from others. Symptoms of love between devotees. So that, concentrate on our sadhana and nice, loving interactions amongst devotees. And try for to do whatever service is recommended. Try for unmotivated, try to practice the unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service, whatever is needed. I heard Prabhupada say once that if I say that I would like to serve Krishna, my Lord, please engage me in service like this, with some condition. He said this will not help us at all. I mean, he was giving a very higher So this unconditional service attitude, even though it may be a little abrasive on our mind at first, it will purify us very quickly. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Something. One more.
I was just, as a follow-up on his question on tolerance, I was just thinking how there's material tolerance and then there's spiritual tolerance. So when we don't have yet a higher taste, when we're not situated on some kind of platform of spiritual realization, then we're forced to practice material tolerance, which is usually like grin and bear it, you know. So we go out, say, in the public for some kind of program, distribution, or whatever. And there's nasty people, there's police bothering us, there's difficult weather, whatever it is. And we often have to just practice tolerating, understanding that this is just, the modes of nature. But it's hard to tolerate, it's kind of painful to tolerate, so it kind of forces us to realize that, wow, I'm not anywhere spiritually. I gotta take shelter so that tolerance comes from a spiritual platform. So the Abhidhamma, he's tolerating, not because he's practicing grin and bear it really expertly, but because he actually, his consciousness is situated somewhere else, so it's practically like he doesn't even notice it. Like we don't notice ourselves breathing, it just happens automatically. So for an Abhidhamma, he doesn't notice, oh, that it's freezing cold out here, so I should put on really thick clothing, or it's really hot out here, so I should carry an umbrella, or people are nasty to me, so I should turn away, or he's actually just not noticing those things because he's so absorbed on a different platform. So that's a different type of tolerance than what we're practicing. So we're kind of still stuck on a material tolerance platform, but it's painful and should drive us to want to pursue a higher taste so that we can be situated on the spiritual platform of tolerance.
Just add something that I think we always have an opportunity to realize the shelter of even sadhana bhakti, whether it's our japa, some service, or we're out on the streets and trying to tolerate the situation, that we actually take shelter instead of struggling with the mind. It's rejecting something, some material situation. If we actually take shelter of the kirtan, or our japa, or just pray to the Lord to be absorbed in our service when the mind doesn't want to, or the body doesn't want to, quite often there's full possibility that we can, realize the Krishna's reciprocation, that we're absorbed, that we feel some shelter. We're not disturbed. Acharya Vishnu.
Thank you. A question on the text. It seems to be explaining that the reason Rishabdev was not affected by these material insults was that he was off the bodily platform, in the spiritual platform, situated in his own glory. He did not, he completely understood that matter and spirit were separate. Then in the purport, Prabhupada is saying that he did not possess a material body at all, therefore he was able to tolerate because it was a spiritual body.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, is his body completely spiritual in the sense that one has an eternal spiritual body? Or his body became spiritualized, or what is the, I'm curious about the constitution of that. And then also, his spiritual master's body is also considered fully spiritual. But that's different than their spiritual, maybe different than their spiritual eternal form.
Their eternal swarup. Yeah. well, our understanding is that a pure devotee, or in this case, here's Rishabdev, Shaktivesh avatar. Prabhupada has been identified by advanced persons as Shaktivesh also. So someone who is so empowered, he's in this world just to do, he has a mission, he has a certain empowered service he's doing on behalf of the Lord. So in that way he's as good as God. But so because his consciousness is pure and his activities are on the spiritual platform, his body is considered fully spiritualized. Therefore it's not controlled by the modes of material nature like our bodies are. Or there's a protection. We may see, it looks like, effects of the material nature, like it will get old and diseased. But the soul of that advanced soul is not, he's aloof. It's how do we describe? It's a spiritual strength. Prabhupada says Bala. Balaram is giving us a strength to actually be detached. We can intellectually talk about it, but it's another thing to have some realization. So we should be hoping for that realization. We need it to enthusiastically work, engage in our service in this world. Prabhupada said that our motto should be to work hard for God, work now, samadhi later. So we can see how, because we're so much in the bodily concept of life, it's hard to uninterruptedly engage, keep this body and mind going on in our service. Sometimes we have to bail out, we have to take a break, so to speak, or we're struggling, right? So it's Krishna's, it's the Lord's empowerment that gives us strength to overcome the pulling, how the body can pull us down. The body and conditioned mind can try to bring us back and absorbed in material energy instead of absorbed in spiritual energy. So, someone who's on that platform, so his body is spiritualized. It's iron put in the fire, becomes like fire. Something else?
Yeah, I guess I was just curious, particularly in the context of how we do, Lord Nityananda comes to mind. And the idea in Lord Rishabdev is that because his consciousness was completely somewhere else, he was indifferent to what was going on to his body. So, one question a concept I'm trying to understand is when the Lord descends, he descends in a Satchitananda form, like Lord Chaitanya or Krishna. So that's a spiritual form, yet they're interacting in a realm of the so-called material world. Perhaps with others whose bodily constitution may be different. So Lord Nityananda, he's an avadut, and his consciousness is absorbed, but that is his eternal spiritual form. So his consciousness is absorbed in somewhere else. Lord Chaitanya will get absorbed somewhere else, but that is also his eternal spiritual form. So it's just an interesting phenomenon, I guess.
Yeah. Chincha Beta Beta Tattva. Just thinking of one thing. Prabhupada said, anyway, that he was fully independent So it's described when we actually, a soul enters into his spiritual, his swarup, his spiritual condition. He actually becomes independent. He's not under the influence of modes of nature, or being pushed by any false ego or conditioned state of mind. And that's his glory. The true glory is that he's freed from this material world. That's natural. We're in an unnatural situation. And so we have to become under the laws of the material world. We're as in a spiritual society, Vedic society, or Vaishnava society, we follow certain rules and regulations. Even if we're advanced, even the pure devotee comes, he follows certain rules and regulations, at least to teach others. That's standard. There's certain dharmas, there's street dharma and men's dharma, the way to dress and act. But if one is actually completely liberated and absorbed in his spiritual life, and he's not under the influence, he doesn't have to follow these rules and regulations. It's a challenge because we don't know, the conditioned soul doesn't know how to respond to that. It's not an example to follow. If we try to follow it, we get bewildered. So, okay, time's late. Is that all right? Anything else? Thank you. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Cool.